Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this Digital North American FP&A board, where today we will talk about FP&A Change Management, how to drive analytical transformation. My name is Hans Gobin. I am a FP&A Trend and International FP&A Board Ambassador, and today I'll facilitate this meeting. Just in terms of stats, let me just tell you that we have over 320 people joining us from over 34 countries, but mostly from North American region. So what do we have for you in store today? Before we look at agenda, this is a quick page for you to look through about what we've discussed in North America region. And a lot of these are on our website. So please take some time and go through it. What's on the agenda for today? So today we're going to look at change management in FP&A. What are the trends? What's happening out there? What are the challenges? Then we go on to look at analytical change case study, framework for managing those smaller change. When we talk about change, it's always big change, big transformation. What about those smaller change? How do we manage those? We will also look at the business partnering aspect of change management. What are we looking there? What sort of trait and skill set do we need to manage those change? And finally, our last presentation will be about technology and how technology can help us to manage change better. We will do conclusions and recommendation, and then at the end, we will have our great Q&A session. So that's what's in store for us today. So it's now a good time for me to start introducing my panelists. So ladies and gentlemen, why don't you join me on the webcam and come off mute and come and say hello to us. So we have with us our first panelist, Attila Jotter, who is Director of FP&A at Hayward Holdings, Inc. And he's based in North Carolina, USA. And today he will tell us about his case study within his organization as to how they're bringing analytical change, but also how do we do it? You know, what's the framework? Attila, it's great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Hans. It's great to be here and looking forward to the presentations and the discussions today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Attila. Our second presenter today will be Christina Bowe, and Christina Bowe is Senior Director of FP&A at Landmark Health. She's joining us from Florida in the USA. And she will take us through how do you manage those smaller changes? What are those smaller changes? And what's the framework around managing those? Christina, very excited to have you on the platform today.
Yeah, happy to be here as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. Our third panelist is Yvette Zuniga, who's CFO Global Commercial Fire and Controls at Carrier. Based again in Florida, USA, Yvette will take us through the business partnering side of things throughout transformation and change, the skill set, etc. Yvette, it's great to have you with us today.
It's great to be here with all of you, Hans. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Yvette. And finally, we have Steve Mosley with us, who's Principal Solution Consultant for FP&A at Unit 4. Again, based in Florida, we have a bit of a trend there today. Steve will talk to us about technology and change management. Steve, fantastic to have you with us today.
Great, thanks, Hans. So looking forward to this.
Thank you very much, Steve. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got great full panelists and exciting full presentation coming your way very shortly. Panelists, if you don't mind turning your webcam off for a minute and going on mute, I've got a few housekeeping to take everyone through. So thank you for that. Now, you all know about International FP&A Board. Today, it's all about North America. So the 8 chapters we have, you can see highlighted there in a bit of a deeper red. So you would also know already that we are starting our face-to-face meeting very shortly. So please join those face-to-face meeting as well. Let me also remind you that we are doing best practice workshops and FP&A consultancy as well. So what is the Digital FP&A Board? As we all know, or some of you may be new, let me take you through 90 minutes webinar. You have 4 polling questions. Your participation is very much required. Please do and they are via voting, polling. So please do so when I launch the polling question. There is a very interactive Q&A session at the end of the session, but please, you can send any questions you may have right now, and we will look at answering them towards the end. It doesn't matter how many questions we get, because we will answer some of them today. The rest will all be answered via email directly to you. Let me remind you, you can download the presentation right now from the handout section, or if you don't do so, you will get a copy of the recording and presentation a day or two after the meeting. So please bear that in mind. Finally, on this page, just to highlight that when I close the session, there is a feedback form that pops up. So please give us half a minute to a minute of your time. Very important for us to know how well we did, but more importantly, what are those subject matters that you would like us to bring to the table next time around and discuss with you. Very important to look at those. So please do so when I close the session. Our technology partner today is Unit 4. Thank you very much, Unit 4, for making this possible. We all know Unit 4 in Business for People, but they are a global leader in enterprise cloud software for people-centric organization. So thank you very much for making this possible, Unit 4. Now, before I jump into the presentation or the crux of the presentation, I would just like to share with you some stats from a McKinsey survey that was done in late October 2021. A few trends confirmed after years of research. Again, one of the key things was the finance leader role is ever evolving, as we all know. So finance is getting more and more into other business matters. And this is happened during the era of dramatic change, as we know. For instance, COVID pandemic increased the attention being paid to social and environmental issues and accelerated adoption of technology to address all sorts of issues we had. Finance leaders are now deeply involved in determining how the business adapt to these trends, particularly in those places where digital and finance interact. So let me share with you a couple of stats pages that I've got up for you today. And here, to my point that I made earlier on just a moment ago, the CFO's responsibilities have grown in quite a few important areas, as you can see, particularly in digital, the last bit of the slide there. Digital activities have more than tripled. Not just that, investor relationship, post-merger, board, procurement, it's all the areas that are now we are getting more involved in. The next slide is how across the entire finance function, the survey results suggest that digital adoption is very much on the rise. You can see here. The share of finance function respondent reporting to the use of robotics, for example, and artificial intelligence tool has more than tripled since the 2018 survey. I will let you digest this in your own time. I'm just conscious of how much time we have for today. But let me quickly just skim through the next one, which is greater technology adoption in finance having lasting effects on overall company performance. Additionally, the survey results suggests that increasing technology adoption in finance have lasting effects on companies' overall resilience. Respondents who describe their companies as significantly more prepared for the future crisis because of their response to the COVID-19 pandemic also report greater use of digital and automation technology within finance. And finally, this one we can all relate to. There is no one single barrier to adoption of digital technology in finance processes. High and top on the agenda there is, of course, cost, but let's not forget the others: inadequate internal skills, culture, and organizational resistance. I will close my presentation here. given that I've overrun by a couple of minutes already. And let us now jump quickly into our next section, which is the case study. And to deliver that, we've got Attila Jota, who is Director of FP&A at Hayward Holding Inc. And Attila will talk to us about his analytical change case study. So Attila, please join us and take us through your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. So I'm Director of FP&A at Hayward Holdings. Hayward Holdings is a global pool manufacturer, swimming pool equipment manufacturer, with a annual revenue of approximately $1.4 billion. We have manufacturing and sales operations across the globe. And turning to the next slide, we Hayward came from like a family-owned company environment a couple of years ago to a private equity-owned company. And last year, the company also went public, so listed on the New York Stock Exchange. So there has already been a vast amount of change in the company. And obviously, in this new environment, we have to face, we have to operate in a different way than a couple of years ago. So, and as part of this initiative, we launched a planning transformation project earlier this year in the company, because we also need to be able to better guide, obviously, the market, and we need to know what are the assumptions behind our forecast and our plans. Why do we think that the future will look like as we think? So we started the project earlier this year, and we will implement a regular rolling forecast, driver-based, and we started it with revenue and the OPEX planning stream, this transformation. So really, as I briefly mentioned at the beginning, like a couple of seconds ago, I mean, three pillars and three driving forces behind this project are to gain speed. When I talk about speed, you know, we obviously had like various working sessions with the various stakeholders at the beginning of the project, and certainly one of the pain points was that things sometimes take too much time and too long. And obviously we had to understand, and I also had to reiterate to the stakeholders that if you want to do your forecast and budget too accurate and too detailed, you probably lose more than trying to you know make it a bit less, not trying to be always accurate to the last penny, but being able to be faster and not ending up in a situation that by the time you close your forecast, it's already outdated. So we wanted to gain speed. We wanted to gain agility. What I mean with agility is that make a forecast that will make it easier to plan for various scenarios and run various kind of analysis, and to be more nimble in our planning process. And we achieve it by implementing drivers. And the third pillar is transparency, which is kind of related to the previous ones as well. But again, as I said, we have to be very clear on, and everyone has to be very clear on what are our assumptions behind our forecast and budget. How did we make it? Why? What are these driving forces? Again, driver-based planning helps in that, and hosting it in one tool, which is we are also implementing it in a planning tool instead of sending around like various versions of many Excel files. So hosting it in a tool obviously also makes it easier to create more transparency. Looking at the next slide, I mean, a couple of things about how did we manage, you know, the change, and how did we make people embrace basically the transformation. So we had to identify the key stakeholders, and then you can imagine in a planning project, it's not just like finance people. It's also, for example, supply chain people. So big part of the stakeholders were, of course, the people who will be impacted the most about it. And then we have to get them on our side. So obviously, again, the finance people in the various companies who will do the forecast and the budget, and coordinate the forecast and the budget at the local site, for example, but also supply chain people. But another key stakeholder group that we had to talk to and make them a catalyst of the change were obviously management. It's very, very important, of course, that we have the support of management. It impacts so many things and so many aspects. We are all very busy. We always face competing priorities. So obviously, you need to buy in management that your project will rank high on the priority list. We organize workshops, obviously, with the stakeholders, especially, of course, with the people who will be involved in the process. And during these workshops, I found it very important that we get very well prepared and see that, how do we report, for example, revenue? How did we report revenue in our data warehouse in the past? What level of granularity? And do your due diligence and do your analysis and get prepared, because obviously then you will not be considered as just someone who is like walking like 100,000 feet high and not being attached to reality, but you will be considered by them as someone who can actually really help. And then we listened to their pain points, obviously, and then we came with the discussions. Came to the, we went into the discussions, some different views. Obviously, I had to moderate also these discussions, and it's fine that people had different views. Some people wanted to plan some things too granular. Some people wanted to plan those things less granular, but we had to find one solution. So I had to tell them that, okay, it's fine, but we have to find a middle ground on that one. And one question that I also highlighted here was that when one of our colleagues mentioned that will this only be a tool used by corporate? And obviously, I mean, it was a good question, and it was a good opportunity also for me to address it. That no, we don't want to live in silos. We want everyone to speak the same truth and have one version of numbers, be it someone at a local plant or be it someone at the corporate headquarters. That's why, of course, it's very important that we have to have the discussions, we have to take the effort, we have to take the time, but we don't sign it off until everyone is on board, because the worst thing that could happen is that we just try to force it. People think this is just a tool for corporate, and they keep on doing everything the old way and in their own Excel tables, and that just make up our drivers and go seek the numbers just to come up with with the drivers to the numbers that otherwise they planned really not in a driver-based approach. So we wanted to avoid it. So turning to the next slide, to my last slide. So how do we go from here? So we finished the design and signed off the blueprint for both OPEX and revenue planning, which is basically the phase one of the project, a big chunk of our P&L. So we have started the implementation now, and we have a version that everyone is on board with and everyone likes. And in terms of level of granularity, I added this point, we talked about it, and there were some discussions about it, that should we do it more granular, less granular, and also maybe my 2 cents on that one is that and also my experience was that if we are not sure how granular we should do it, should we do it one level deeper or should we stay one level higher, and we really don't know that. It's probably better to stay a level higher, and because it's always easier to go from less granular to more granular than the other way around. And that's something that I also use this argument, in the change management and managing the change and having a constructive discussions and get to the design, and the sign off with the people. So that would be it from me. Now I would just turn it over to you, Hans. The showcase of benefits and the key conclusions that I would add on the last slide. You have to really showcase the benefits. You really need to be very clear, why is the need for this change? what happens if you don't do that? And it helps really people accept the change. And you have to start it. Some companies would just not dare to make the step and to make the change, because they want to change everything in one go, and they cannot do that, and it's just hindering from them. You can start on a pilot, you can start in one part of your P&L in one entity, but you have to start. And yeah, that's it from me, and I can hand it now over to you, Hans.
Attila, thank you very much. Great presentation. Of course, you've taken us through so many things there, just setting down, what that transformation is all about, and then, what did you do? How did you do it? What are the issues? So excellent. Thank you very much. And of course, those 2 conclusion points as well are just, out there in the if you don't showcase the benefit, how do you expect people to buy in? But also, perfection, you have to start somewhere. So why not start? Progress over perfection. That's the word I was looking for. So thank you for that. We've heard from you. Great stuff here. Let us look at what our attendees, our FP&A board members are doing in their organization through the first polling question that I'm just about to launch. So please, ladies and gentlemen, please do vote. And let us ask you, what factors do you think are most critical to driving successful FP&A change? We've just seen all of those factors from Attila described there. Is it leadership and culture, first one? Is it technology? What about skills or processes? What would you say is, do you think are the most important or critical factor in driving successful FP&A change? First option, leadership and culture. Second, technology. Third, skills. And fourth, processes. If you can vote, please, I'll give it another 5-10 seconds, and then we will close the voting, which I'm now going to do. So thank you very much for having voted, and I'll share this with yourself. So, and astoundingly, 78% have said leadership and culture, 10% technology, 2% on skills, and 10% on processes. Attila, any insight from you on this, please?
Not surprised at all about the outcome. I would have also said leadership and culture. Of course, all of are important. You need to have the right technology, you need to have the right skills, you need to have the right process. But none of them will happen if you don't have the right leadership, the support of leadership behind that one, and the right culture. It's, I mean, obviously, new technology costs money. So there needs to be an IP for that one. There needs to be support from the leadership. And obviously, the culture of the people to embrace the change, to embrace the new technology, to learn the new technology, or even to learn the new skills. That's the basis, basically, leadership and culture of everything. That's I agree with the survey.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Attila. Let us now hide this and ask the other panelists to come and join us. And you've got a very exciting question that you would like to put through to them, but I'll read it for you anyway. So what is the biggest challenge you have faced when implementing FP&A transformation within your own organization, panelists? If I may start by asking Christina first. Christina?
Yeah, I find that it's resources and time is the biggest challenge. We all have our day jobs, forecasting and month-end close and everything that goes on. And when a big change or any change comes down, it's just finding the time and the resources to give it the right amount of effort that is required.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Yvette, what will your answer be?
I would say, in addition to what Christina said, because time and resources are definitely critical, is communication. And what do I mean by that? It's important at the beginning of the change that we communicate what the roadmap is so that people understand what is happening and when it's happening, and communicate frequently so that the stakeholders all know what's happening throughout the project as you're going through the change, and that they understand what's in it for them and what is the benefit to them. So to me, communication, as we saw earlier, a lot of it is leadership and culture, and that starts and ends with people. So communicating with the people that are impacted by the change, I think, is the biggest challenge. making sure you communicate enough.
Thank you very much, Yvette, building on top of that. And finally, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, basically, both Yvette and Christina have hit the nail on the head. I would add to this perhaps status quo and what's in it for me. It's too easy for people to carry on using, the Excel spreadsheet that they've been using for the last 5 years, even though the amount of work that's placed on finance or FP&A. So I would simply say status quo as an issue.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your answers, ladies and gentlemen. Let us now move on to the next section. So I will ask the rest of the panelists to go off the camera, and I will introduce Christina again, Senior Director of FP&A at Landmark Health, who is going to talk to us about, so how do you manage the smaller changes? So Christina, over to you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Christina Bowe. I'm a Senior Director of Financial Planning and Analysis at Landmark Health, where I lead the financial planning and analysis team. Landmark is a leader in at-home care, and we're working to change healthcare for chronic and complex patients. Very similar to the old-fashioned house calls. We have a team of providers that go into the home and work with patients, primary care physicians, to make sure that they're receiving the best care possible. We were recently acquired by Optum Health, which is a division of United Health Group as well. So let's get started on the next slide. So what comes to mind when you hear change management? Typically it's large projects or large changes, like an acquisition. I just mentioned that my company was acquired. Reorganizations, maybe even a rebranding. But what about small changes, like a new manager or new team members or resignations? We're all experiencing that right now with the Great Resignation. Or maybe some process changes or some planning, or maybe it's a new tool that's been introduced. Small changes need to be managed as well. On the next slide, I'll start with a couple of examples of small changes. So the first is a change in leadership. So in a prior role of mine, I had a period of time where I had 5 managers in a 3-year time span. So a big change for me, but not necessarily a big change for my team beneath me. I actually had a comment from one of my team members who said, the VP, SVP level is interchangeable. And so I thought to myself, are they apathetic to the change, or am I doing too good of a job to filter them from change? And I felt that this is an opportunity to really think about that smaller change and the framework, because there could be small things that impact them with the leadership change. I mean, it could be as simple as setting a print area on all of their spreadsheets. Maybe a new leader wants to see something printed out. Maybe the new leader will ask for analysis that we did in the past, and they're not wanting to do it again because, oh, we tried that, it didn't work. Well, maybe now things will be different. Maybe the outcome will be different. Maybe it'd be a new way, fresh perspective of looking at something that's been tried before. So just really thinking about the impacts to the team as a whole. And then the second example is a little bit larger. It's a new commission plan that was rolled out, and small change on the finance team side. It was just a matter of changing the calculation. The calculation went from dollars sold to pounds sold of the product. It doesn't seem like much from the finance side, but it actually changed a lot downstream for the sales team. The budget was also increased to 30% from the prior year, and the budget was rolled out late. The sales team did not receive their budgets until February, after a month had already passed on the year. So with this change, they've not only changed a calculation, but increased the goals. There was really poor communication around it, poor timing in the rollout as well. And so it left the sales team really to determine the impact of this change on their own. They ran some spreadsheets on their own and found that the calculation would actually result in lower commission from the prior year for the same amount of sales in dollars and in pounds. And so that created a lot of anxiety with the sales team because they found that they were going to be, losing a lot of income. And it reduced morale as well. Some teams were unwilling to sign off on the new commission plan, and there was actually resignations that occurred because of the rollout. And it led to a lot of assumptions on the reason for change. Was it strictly cost cutting? They weren't sure. On the next slide, I will talk about what could have been managed better in both examples. So this will lead into the framework in a moment. But in my opinion, in both examples, defining the purpose. So, when a manager or a leader changes within an organization, there could be a greater purpose and behind it. A lot of organizations have rotational assignments. Maybe the leader's moving on, maybe the leader's moving up in the organization. Maybe they want somebody with a fresh perspective to come into a certain business unit, right? So there could be a purpose behind those changes, and getting the team aligned behind that purpose will help to implement the change. And then the same with the commission plan, defining the reason why, company strategy, overall goals would have really helped with the buy-in from the team and understanding why the change was implemented. And then the second one is the one I feel is extremely important, and that's the analysis of downstream impacts. As with the one with the new manager, I said it could be small, could be minor, but on the same token, your team, it's important to empower your team to be able to move up and have succession planning, and their relationship with someone above you is important. And so that impact of them learning new ways of working and a new style is something not to be overlooked. And then we've already mentioned the downstream impacts on the commission plan. There was resignations, a lot of angst and anxiety, and the next bullet could have solved a lot of that, and that could have been a communication plan. And then timely rollout is also important, especially if you're dealing with budgets. If a budget isn't going to be rolled out timely, communication as to why, what's happening, what's the plan for the month that's already passed before the budget rolls out, again, it all rolls back up to communication. And then lastly, I think finance really could have provided the comparison of the plans in the commission example and given guidance on how to grow the market, how to stay, maybe flat year over year with the sales, but also how to grow the market. Maybe give some examples, maybe find some opportunities where they could dig in, or customers that hadn't bought for a while, or done some analysis behind it to somewhat soften the blow when the communication did come out. And then lastly, in conclusion, the framework for smaller change. It's not that much different from larger changes, but really it's just being thoughtful and putting some thought behind the changes and defining the purpose for the change. Then doing that analysis of the downstream impacts, not only to people, but to process, and really being thoughtful about what those could be, and empathetic about those impacts, and designing your communication around that. You'll be able to gain buy-in through that communication plan. And then lastly, follow up, see how the change is going. How is the implementation? What is, is there any anxiety about things? Where can you help or smooth things over? And what more can you do to make the change successful? Back over to you, Hans. That's all I have for the framework.
Thank you very much, Christina. Great presentation. I think often what we tend to forget is, there's lots and lots of small change happening, but is there a framework that we run everything through just to make sure we don't drop the ball? Much more importantly, on bigger projects, yes, we have big plans and big communication plans, big project management, etc. But the ball falls down very quickly on the smaller ones. So thank you for highlighting and giving those great 2 examples there as to how smaller change has to be managed as well, and what we could have done better in both instances. Thank you very much for that. Let us ask our audience now and our panel, members of the FP&A club, as to what are they doing, how are they managing smaller changes. So please, if you can vote, how are smaller FP&A changes being managed within your own organization? Is it with the same rigor and planning as larger transformation are done, as we have seen just now? We have smaller change management framework, a completely different change management framework, or it's managed independently by each owner in their own way, or finally, it's not even managed. If you can vote, please. So how are smaller FP&A changes managed within your organization? With the same rigor and planning as larger transformation? We have smaller change management framework. B, C, managed independently, or D, it is not managed properly at all. If you can vote, please. I will now close the vote, and I'm going to share the results and go through it. 9% said with the same rigor and planning. 7% said we have a different management framework for it. C, 58% manage independently, and 27% it's not managed properly. Christina, any feedback from you?
Well, I would have chosen the one that is 58%, but really what I see here is a lot of opportunity, you know, especially for the 27%. I say the 9% who manage it with rigor and planning, that's fantastic, but the 27% that it's not managed properly, you know, hopefully get a takeaway from this session, and are more thoughtful around that as to how they can maybe get their arms around managing it better.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Let us now hide this and move on to the question that Christina has for the other panelists. So as FP&A leaders, how do you manage smaller change within your own organization? Can I ask the other panelists to come and join us and give us their answers, please? If I may start with yourself, Attila.
Yeah, in principle, I mean, the principles of managing a smaller change are similar to managing how do we manage bigger changes. I would say, well, the scope is smaller, and when I speak about scope, I would rather say stakeholder management. For a smaller change, you don't contact so much with senior leadership. So it's more focused on the second group, more with the people who are impacted with the change, and maybe with their managers. But besides that, I mean, obviously, we still prepare, you know, like manuals and things like that, but those manuals are also shorter. So these are the differences, but the principles are similar. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Yvette, your answer, please.
Yeah, so for us, we have a pretty robust framework for change management for big changes, but I would say smaller changes also are handled in a less formal way. Our focus with those, of course, is keeping up to date standard work documentation. That is an opportunity, a continuous opportunity for us, because it's not the fun part of the work, right, to go update documentation and standard work documents when you make a change, but it's a very important piece, because it's the piece that keeps the processes running in a very stable way.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And finally, Steve.
Yeah, hi, thanks. So we've had a lot of success recently with phasing projects. So as and when a part of a process is available, it gets released, so that, you know, first of all, the management can see, you know, value to what's being implemented. But it's more in terms of bite-sized chunks. You know, in the software world, it's called, you know, Scrum and Sprint methodology. As and when things are available, release it, show the value, and again, more bite-sized chunks than big bang approach.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We saw 3 completely different answers there. One, in a bigger organization, it's managed very similar to what the bigger change would have been, but of course, in a slightly different manner. And Yvette, you've talked about, you know, independently managing it, but with more or less the same rigor. And of course, Steve, your spin there with the Scrum. So thank you very much, guys. Let us now move on to our next part of our presentation, which is on business partnering and analytical change. And to do that, we have Yvette Zuniga from Carrier. So Yvette, over to yourself.
Thank you, Hans, and hello everyone. It's a pleasure being here with all of you today. I'm the CFO of Global Commercial Fire and Controls at Carrier. For those of you that don't know, Carrier is a $21 billion leading provider of healthy, safe, sustainable, and intelligent building and cold chain solutions. I'm based in our worldwide headquarters in beautiful Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, and my experience is primarily with large public entities, such as the one that I'm working in now. And my commentary and experience, of course, is from that lens. So keep that in mind, as it may or may not necessarily apply to smaller entities. But we've talked a lot about change here, and transformation and change has become a pretty constant in business of businesses of any size worldwide. And that change that has come from whether it's changing structures to become more efficient, or changes that have been propelled by technology, which has been the case for sure over the past few years. That change is imperative to making organizations move to the next level. But those changes can also cause a tremendous amount of stress in the system and organizations as companies go through that journey into more efficient structures, such as shared service environments, and more complex, sometimes matrixed organizational structures. So in today's session, I will be sharing my thoughts and experiences on business partnering through that transformation and change. We talked a little bit about the fact that change is very much associated with people. It starts and ends with people. And I think as business leaders and as finance leaders, as we partner with the business through those changes, we play a pivotal role in helping the business. And I'd like to start on my next slide with an understanding of the priorities for finance. So as we've seen in some of the materials that Hans showed at the beginning, with some of the studies that have been done in terms of the priorities for CFOs, the roles of the CFO and the role of FP&A as a result of that have really evolved over time, creating really a significant need for business partnering to drive value throughout the organization. And I like to think of finance priorities as a pyramid with varying levels of complexity of those activities, not varying levels of importance, but different levels of complexity. So when we think about this pyramid and start with the foundational activities, which are like, if you think about those activities as being record to report, order to cash activities, AP, treasury controls, that sort of thing, those activities have been the activities that have probably gone through the most visible change in organizations, and how we care for those activities and having robust processes behind them is extremely important, as these are similar to having a robust customer support area, for example. And it's in these areas that our customers and suppliers are closely linked to. So this is where we would develop a perception of how easy or how hard it is for those parties to do business with us. So if we have these processes running smoothly, those will represent themselves to the external world in an easy to do business with company. And of course, everybody, customers and suppliers alike, like a company that makes it simple to do business with versus complicated. And so it's important that as we go through these changes, that we keep that in mind and that we develop those processes accordingly. Going up the pyramid on information sharing, FP&A plays a very key role in the development of those processes that support the creation of information or the development of information for both internal and external stakeholders. This is a critical priority for finance, communicating across different groups, whether it's internal employees, understanding business performance, to investors or lenders or other stakeholders, getting the information they need to evaluate the business in a clear, concise, and focused manner is a critical component of the service that finance provides to the business. And so how FP&A does that is with efficiency, and it's important that we make it simple yet clear and comprehensive. Finally, the strategic focus is a key priority for finance. In this space, we've seen the CFO and FP&A really transition to more of a partner that is actively involved with the business in driving growth, whether it's M&A or other inorganic activities, to competitive offering and developing those competitive offerings, to really driving value to the key stakeholders. So as we've seen, there's been a lot of change over the past few years along the activities in this pyramid. And on the next slide, I'll share my observations of how these changes have created the need for our roles to change as well, because we can't stay stagnant. So as we think of the foundational activities, the R2R, OTC, and AP, these areas have suffered, as I mentioned, the most change, right? Everything from outsourcing and labor offshoring to shared service centers, whether it be shared service centers internally within the organization or with an external third-party provider, and centralization of functions where the supporting functions within organizations such as finance may or may not necessarily report to the business or to business leaders. So reporting and planning has gone from manual consolidation of data where we were doing work essentially through spreadsheets and limited charting to more real-time visual representation of information that is typically housed in dashboard tool or business intelligence tools. And those data points and information and insights are delivered through various formats, including mobile technology. Here, the key factor of change over the past few years has been really delivering visual data for easy digestion by non-finance people, right? So our customers of the information that we usually produce may or may not necessarily be, financially savvy people, and so we have to cater to different audiences. And having that visual aspect and that visual representation of data that people can carry with them and easily access through either mobile devices or another form of mobile technology is imperative here. And lastly, on strategic support, I mean, we've seen finance be a lot more involved in that, and it is now really expected that finance not just be in the backseat supporting strategic initiatives, but actually take a leading role in developing the strategy as well as execution of that strategy for the business. And then post-execution of those strategies, it is expected that we also drive accountability to the measures and the metrics that we're committing to in the strategy. So finance really is in a big way at the driver's seat along with the CEO of driving and implementing those strategies. So we would be remiss if we think about this change to ignore that all of this has an impact on business leaders, on the organization, both in finance as well as the business and the other supporting functions. And on my next slide, I'd like to walk through what are some of those perceived pain points that I have seen through organizations as they go through change, or better said, the experience that the business side has seen as those changes are occurring and after the change. So the first thing that I've noticed business leaders go through is a sense of loss of control and visibility. And what do I mean by that? So as we transition and move activities outside the immediate organizational structure of those leaders, the perception is that they're losing control and that they're losing visibility. And there's a fear that since they no longer have direct supervision of the staff that's doing the work, that they have less influence in that and they don't have as much access, if you will. The next thing is loss of autonomy. So especially in matrixed organizations and organizations that are going through a lot of change and big transformations, there can be a sense of loss in autonomy in decision making. and speed. And it takes a bit more time and effort to execute or effectuate changes in a matrix. And sometimes even policies that the companies may implement, like delegations of authority, that can be pretty complex, especially in large organizations, and could require a lot of different touch points before a decision is made. That can come across to leaders as a loss of autonomy versus having everything under one roof, them having direct control and authority over the different areas. And so there's definitely a sense of that. And then lastly, the loss of service levels, or the perceived loss of service levels, with a concern of how well those activities are being executed, supported, and how the business is understanding the meaning of these activities as they get shifted to shared service environments or outsourcing. And the business depends, of course, on other organizations. Their ability to expedite or circumvent processes diminishes greatly as these functions move outside of the main organization. So there's definitely a loss of or sense of loss of service levels. So how can we in finance help and FP&A help, and what can we do about that? It is our role to support the business, and how do we help them through those transitions? And on my next slide, I'd like to propose how our roles are as business partners are critical during these times of transformation and change. And as I said, it starts and ends with people. So our roles are to not just make it clear and report on numbers, but also to help businesses through change. And one of the ways we do that, or we can do that effectively, is acting as the navigator for the business, providing visibility and clear visibility to areas of opportunities, as well as proactively managing areas of risk as we're going through that change, to make sure that none of the key controls of the business suffer through those changes, and also that the customers of the business don't suffer through those changes either, that we don't make it more difficult to do business with us, that we don't change processes in a way that create more complexity and less agility. So that's how we can help there. And then being the central point of contact for the business. In big organizations, a lot of times, as I mentioned, the changes come with different players in the mix, whether it be third-party service providers or different organizations providing centralized services. And it's important for the business to have a central point of contact, so that they're not having to go to 5 or 6 or 7 different places to solve what they used to solve with a simple phone call to you. And leading those processes that result also in robust control environment is part of being the central point, driving performance and accountability throughout the organization to make sure that nothing is falling apart, so that we get rid of those fears of either losing control, losing service, or losing visibility into the business and the quality of the information. The next item is, driving process and performance with the partner organizations. You shift from being, when you go through a change like this, you shift from being having authority over a specific area to being the customer of another area or the customer of a third-party provider. So what's important here is that you work with that provider, whether it's internal or external, to design the process and be a part of the design of the process, as well as driving performance and agreeing to what are the metrics that you're going to be following on a regular basis. You can't manage or improve what you don't measure, so it's important that you have those metrics in place and that you have the service level agreements in place with those providers. Next is providing real-time insights in user-friendly formats, of course, to support decision-making for the business. And the user-friendly format is important, especially as all these different functions move to different locations. It's having dashboards in place that have, visualization, data visualization that makes it easier to digest, and that provide really quick real-time insights that are also portable in nature, right? Business is very global now. People are traveling the world, especially now that COVID has been easing. Everybody's back to traveling again. It's also important that people can easily access information from anywhere and at any time. So portability is key in providing those real-time insights. And then utilizing market and business insights to deliver on strategic initiatives. And the deliver on strategic initiatives, as I mentioned earlier, is we're expected to be at the driver's seat. We're expected to be at the driver's seat of implementing strategy and making change happen. So delivering on those strategic initiatives is part of being a good business partner throughout these processes. My main call of action to all of us here today is to focus on adding value. Design your processes to add value to your stakeholders, deliver insights that drive value, and implement strategies that add to the value and the growth of the business. That's imperative. And throughout the process, of course, communicate openly, frequently, and clearly so that the change is easier for all involved. That's all for me today. Thank you, and over to you, Hans.
Yvette, thank you very much. Fantastic presentation. You've touched so many points, but much more importantly, the last piece of the puzzle there is what can we as business partner do throughout transformation and change management, and you've touched through 5 fantastic key points there. So what I suggest we do next is go and listen to what our audience have got to say on our next polling question, which is very related to what we've just seen. So what role do you consider most important for FP&A business partners in change management? If you can vote, please. The first option there is change agent identifying opportunities and risks. B, the project lead with robust control and accountability. What about education and training, leading that? Or finally, D, strategy, execution and development. So what role do you consider the most important for FP&A business partners in change management? First option, change agent, identifying risks and opportunities. The project lead with robust control and driving accountability, education and training, and finally, strategy, execution, and development. I will give it another 5-10 seconds, and I will now close the poll and share the results. And as we can see, 35% are talking about change agent, 28% have gone for be the project lead, drive robust control and accountability, 8% education, 30% strategy, execution, and development. Yvette, any insight from you on this?
Yeah, I like the outcome of the poll because I agree. I think they're all somewhat important and equally important at different stages of the change. And definitely the 3 that have weighted the most are critical. So definitely agree with the audience.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Let us now quickly move on to our next section, which is the question from yourself to the other panelists. Panelists, if you can join us, please. So does FP&A take the lead in managing change projects within your organization? How does it happen within your organization? Attila, can I start by yourself, please?
Yeah, I mean, we are managing several global initiatives, and the company is also, as I mentioned, went from like a family-owned environment to a public environment in a couple of years, quite big transformation. I think corporate FP&A takes the lead on many of the initiatives because many of the initiatives are global, and just it's makes more sense that us who have like a more global view are also leading those initiatives.
Very definitely. Thank you very much. Christina, your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on it earlier, FP&A is involved in so much that if it's not managing the change projects, or at least increment or, very involved in really part of that strategy. So, I think about a large project that I was on in a prior role where we were completely redefining the platform, the technology platform that the product operated on, and I really enjoyed being part of that strategy and what was the project or the product going to do in the future, and et cetera. And so, FP&A really plays a role in that, not just doing the ROI on the project and what does this mean, but really being a part of, helping to price up what are the right features to put on a product and things like that, and what are the best avenues in a competitive environment for a technology platform. So it's a real opportunity and very interesting to be able to be a part of those things, whether you're managing them or not.
Thank you very much. And finally, Steve.
Yeah, I think it says something that two of the presenters today are FP&A directors, and all the successful projects I've worked with, FP&A have always taken the lead. It seems to be a trend that more and more companies are creating FP&A specific departments, maybe rolling up to the CFO, but yeah, the successful ones definitely led by FP&A.
Absolutely spot on there. I think we've got our fingers in so many pie. Sorry for the expression, and we know so much about the company that we have to be driving those projects, and of course we drive them to fruition. So thank you very much for all your answers, ladies and gentlemen. Let us now move on to our next session, which is on technology. And to deliver the technology session, we have Steve Mosley, who is Principal Consultant FP&A at Unit 4. Steve, over to you, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks, Hans. So yes, as Hans had just explained, my name is Steve Mosley. I'm a solution consultant specializing in FP&A. And that basically means that my job is to persuade and demonstrate that a good FP&A solution can have a really positive impact on an organization. And in the next slide, I'm going to talk about an example of change. Change is constant, right? We plan for change, right? But did any of us plan for this? These three graphs, basically it's my travel profile. Number of trips, number of days on the road, and number of miles traveled. And as you can see, 2020, and particularly in terms of number of miles traveled, it went from an average of 150,000 down to practically zero. So the impact of COVID caught everyone off guard. But the surprising thing was the reactivity that we saw, and certainly from our customers. If you think of restaurants as a good example, how they changed to delivery and pickup. But even so, there was very little formal simulation or modeling, to see the impact of these change. There was still an awful lot of spreadsheet calculations. What if I do this? But there was no global view of those simulations. And on the next slide, we're going to talk about a global video game producer. Now, I guess these guys were more fortunate than most because, the fact that everybody had to stay at home helped their cause because they're producing video games. But it's still a very fast-moving market. They still have to react to market trends, to changes in platform, even changes of ownership models, moving from owning the software to subscription-based. In a conversation with them, we went through these some of these points. Now, the first one should be given: data quality. Bad data is potentially a bad plan. And again, because of the speed of the market that they're in, they needed to be able to pivot at speed. And to support this, they needed time to insight. And what this means is, instead of waiting until the month end when all the financial statements are produced, when all the analysis is done by the FP&A team, by the financial team, it needs to be real time. They need to be able to look and see today what is happening in their business. Now, both the pivot at speed and the time to insight actually contributes to continuous planning. And this is their current model. They're not doing an annual budget and then maybe a quarterly forecast. They're doing continuous planning. Again, pivoting at speed, time to insight. And the last point that was really important to them was usability. Yes, they had a platform that had lots of technical capabilities, but they needed all these different locations, whether it's different departments, different geographies, even different currencies, lots of different feeds into the application. Usability was key. Without that, they would have reverted back to spreadsheets, and they would be back to perhaps the first point, which is data quality. So this continuous planning, on the next slide, I'm going to describe this in a bit more. We often refer to FP&A as corporate performance management, but really should it be continuous performance management? Now, let's think about this cycle. So the CEO and the CFO are sat in the office and they create a strategy. We then create a plan for that strategy. We then execute that plan. We then need to review the plan. Were we successful? How far off are we? And provide the feedback. Now that feedback is going to go back into the strategy, which may be tailored, it may be updated. And then we go back into, yes, we're going to execute the plan, review, feedback. So it becomes really, really continuous. But what's also important is how we do that planning across the organization. And on this next slide, I'm going to talk about something that we often refer to now as extended planning and analytics. So in the past, we've had all these silos, and the departments that you can see on the slide, they were silos. And what we need now is we need everybody to recognize that the cogs in the wheel. Anything that production do, so if they if the production department raise productivity, produce more items for sale, that's going to impact revenue. If it impacts revenue, perhaps we need a new marketing campaign, to take it so we can actually sell the stuff. Maybe we need additional FTEs. Maybe we need more employees to support either the sales team or maybe even production. All of this comes together by finance using the balance sheet, the income statement, and the cash flow. Now, all these cogs, and we've talked about production making a change to their plan, this all needs to be real time. Again, going back to the time to insight and the pivot at speed. We don't want to be waiting until the end of the month until the financial statements are produced. We need these insights to be now. So again, the fact that we have these cogs, everything is interacting with everything else. How do we actually visualize that? So let's have a look on the next slide. And I'll talk about an example. And what we're looking at here is, we're looking at some waterfall charts. We're comparing actuals for a particular year against forecasts for a particular year. But what we're also comparing are versions or simulations. We have a base case, and the base case is, what we would expect to normally happen. But we've also got a version which is, if COVID continues, this is what we expect to happen. And we can see, based on this waterfall chart, we can see deviations by absolute numbers and also percentages. And what's important here is the system has to have the ability to add versions for simulation easily and dynamically. This could be based on world events, on market events, on financial events, political events. So any kind of event that is going to impact your business, you need to be able to do a simulation based on that particular event. So on the next slide, I want to talk about some of the key takeaways. First of all, the platform that you use has to be, obviously, it needs to be suitable for today, but it also needs to be able to grow with you and is for the future. And that could be 2, 3, 5 years. You do not want to be changing an FP&A solution every year. Okay, so the platform has to be as future-proof as technology allows. And this includes things like cloud services, microservices, machine learning, even concepts such as serverless computing, which gives you the scalability. And I think Yvette touched on this during her presentation. We need to link execution to strategy. Most organizations will probably have a published strategy. If you go onto a company's website, pretty much guaranteed that they will have a strategy. Over the next 5 years, we're going to grow by X%. That strategy has to be linked to execution. And then finally, we talked about usability with the publishing company. You can have the best technology in the world. You can have the most sophisticated technology, but without user adoption, all is for nothing. And really, again, let's go back to the publishing company. All these disparate locations wanting to enter data so they get the ability to pivot at speed and insight. We need a user interface that they will easily accept and adopt, so that they can actually perform all of those capabilities. So with that, I'm going to pass back to Hans. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve. Great presentation, and of course you've shown us, what happened during COVID, and with the example, what did the customers look for, and then shared with us what technology can do for us. So very exciting. Thank you very much. Let us quickly go and find out what our audiences are doing, have been doing with technology. So if you can please give us your insight here. What part does technology play in change or simulation modeling within your organization? Entirely at 100%, higher than 50%, or less than 50%, or not at all? So technology, does it play a big part in your change or simulation modeling within your organization? Yes, entirely. Second, higher than 50%, less than 50%, and then finally, no, not at all. So I'll give it another 5 seconds if you can vote, please. But may I also remind you, ladies and gentlemen, keep sending your questions. We've got a lot of questions coming in. Very exciting. We'll answer a few of them today. The rest we will answer via email to you, so they'll all get answered. So let me now close this and share the results with you. 5% entirely, 42% higher than 50, 42% less than 50, and then 12% not at all. Steve, quick insight from you on this?
Not surprising at all, really. The only surprise is the fact that 42% said higher than 50%. The 12% that says not at all, really that's a significant number. I mean, we have 12% of the attendees that are planning and budgeting effectively on either pieces of paper or spreadsheets.
Yeah, no, absolutely spot on. The 42 and the 42, the 42% less than 50, we need to try and push up much more than that, and the 12% absolutely spot on. What are they using? So thank you for that, Steve. Let me now hide this and let us go to the panel discussion and the question that you wanted to put to the panel. So panelists, if you can join me. How important do you think an integrated software or platform is for impactful analytical change in your organization? Attila, a quick answer from yourself?
Yeah, well, normally you cannot disconnect your, let's say, for example, demand planning, operations planning from your financial planning. I mean, typically you would have your demand planning is driving your operations planning, also your raw material requirements, but these things all drive, of course, have to be in line with your financial planning. And obviously, I mean, and then we also talk about the headcount planning, which also has to be in line with the financial planning, but it's impacted also by your operations planning. So, if you disconnect it, then you can question yourself, what's the value added from financial planning? But And all of that, of course, you need to have to do it with the support of proper tools and systems. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Spot on there. So, Christina, your answer?
Sorry, yeah, I think tools are very important. I'd mentioned the resource constraints that can happen with change management, and having the right tools and being able to get to data and analyzing that data quickly is very important in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Yvette, your answer, please.
I would say it's critical. It's critical to the organization. And when I think about tools and software, I think about 5 different variables that I look for, right? One is it stable? Is it portable? Is it connected? Meaning, is it connected to the ERP so that you have real-time data and in a digestible format? And the most important thing of this whole thing of having kind of a tool attached to the planning process and the analytical process is really having a single source of truth. Because in many organizations, especially ones that have multiple ERPs, it's really difficult to get to the single source of truth and that we're all talking the same language and with the same numbers. So to me, that is the most critical component, and that's where the connectedness to the ERPs come in.
Absolutely spot on, all 3 of you. I think the key thing we find that it is absolutely amazingly important. But guess what? Not a lot of organizations are investing in it. Hopefully, they will be very shortly, or in the next shorter term, next year or so. But the importance is absolutely tremendous. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. And it is a good time now for us to go to our key takeaways session. So what we'll do here is, of course, we'll go around the room and ask each panelist for one of their key conclusion. What is that one thing you would like to highlight to the audience today about change management or your case study or technology? So Attila, if I may start with yourself, please.
Yeah, I mean, from the 2 points I mentioned, maybe if I choose one from the 2, I would say really showcase the benefits. It's not because I think we should like oversell the project or oversell the change or overpromise ourselves. I rather approach it from an angle that before you embark on the change, you have to be convinced that that's the right thing to do. And then you have to communicate the benefits to get others convinced as well that that's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. Christina, your conclusion, please.
Yeah, I mentioned before, I think that analyzing the downstream impacts is extremely important. So I would say that, even with change, if it's small or large, just understanding who those key stakeholders are, who are impacted, what those impacts will be, and how you can communicate around those impacts and gain buy-in. So.
Thank you very much, Christina. Yvette?
Yeah, for me, the 2 are honestly being the navigator, as I mentioned, right? Be the pilot for the business, navigate. Think of this as the cockpit on a plane, and you're driving the direction. And we are expected to be at the driver's seat. And in addition to that, process and accountability. There is no software or system that will protect you against a bad process. So for me, process is critical, and that helps you drive measurement and accountability throughout the organization.
Thank you very much, Yvette. And finally, Steve?
I would go with linking execution to strategy. Even though I am a technologist, I would say linking execution to strategy is important. The way you do that does require a good, solid platform. But yeah, definitely the strategy question.
Well, thank you very much. We've seen end-to-end all the conclusions here, from the case study to how we manage smaller change, to the importance of business partnering, and of course closing the loop there with technology. So we now reach our exciting Q&A session. Let me just quickly remind the audience that we will answer a few of your questions today, but please keep sending your questions. They are very important, and we will answer the remainder of them via email directly to yourself. So please carry on and direct it to whoever presenter you want them answered. So let us start very quickly. Attila, with Attila for the first one. How did you implement a driver, you talked about driver-based planning within your transformation. Was that in existence, or did you implement it throughout that transformation process? And what challenges did you face there?
Yeah, I think, I mean, how to link, of course, the granularity and of the planning and the drivers, and the two are interrelated, of course. If you want to do planning too granular, then it's more difficult, and you may end up in having also too many drivers. And then just imagine, of course, that you want to make like a bridge of like the prior year results to the forecast results or something to management, and you start to explain like, I don't know, like 25 drivers. You probably lose their attention after 2 minutes or something. So I think it's really drivers and granularity. I think this is, and of course, convincing the people and then explaining it to the people and the rationale that why do we have to find the right balance. This is what I think that the biggest challenge that it would cross my mind now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They work hand in hand, drivers and granularity. And you know, how often do you review your drivers?
I would say, you know, once we implement the project, we have to do like kind of a post-mortem analysis and also follow up with the people. And this is why I also mentioned that it's always easier to go a little bit, if we are not sure about it, go a bit less granular, because it's easier than to go and implement a couple of new drivers than do it the other way around. But again, as I say, after the first round, we definitely implement, you know, like organize like a session with the stakeholders and so on, and then take the lessons. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for a great answer. Let's go now to Christina. Christina, you talked about the framework for managing small changes. Of course, within an organization, there are lots and lots of small change happening. How do we make sure we keep on top of all of it? I mean, what would you advise here?
Yeah, you know, I think it's just with anything with your everyday tasks, just really prioritizing. And I would look at it from what small changes have the biggest impact to the bigger picture too, and that may help with prioritization. You know, it's not everything probably can be run through the framework. It may have to be something you do like super quick, you know, just as you're thinking through your day and what you've got on your plate. There's also opportunities to delegate, maybe give some of your more senior team members an opportunity to help manage something in order to grow. But I really think it just comes down to prioritization and how do things fit into the bigger picture and strategic goals.
Absolutely, and just making sure you keep abreast of everything that is happening rather than letting things drop. So fantastic, thank you for that great answer there. We now go to Yvette. Yvette, you talked about one of the pain points is loss of control and visibility when there are change and people's perception. How did you deal with it, or how do you advise people to deal with that?
I think I'm on mute, sorry.
Yeah.
My advice for people to handle that is really be clear and be frequent in your communication with stakeholders. Make sure that they're aware of what's happening throughout the change, and then after the change, make sure you have clear metrics that you're following so that you give a sense of or give an understanding of how the processes are in control. I think ongoing metric tracking is critical.
No, absolutely. I think you harped on communication as well, which is absolutely so important in this case. So thank you very much for that. Our last question goes to Steve. Of course, Steve, over the last 2 years, we've seen organization asking for a lot of help as far as technology is concerned, a lot of change. What challenge have you found the most important, or what has been most challenging with customers? Steve, I think you're on mute.
I apologize. I was on mute. Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier, the status quo. I spoke to a CFO recently, and his response to to implementing an FP&A solution was, I've got Excel spreadsheets that work. It gives me what I want. Now, the problem is that at his level, he gets his numbers. The fact that at the lower level, the FP&A guys, they're working weekends, they're working at night to give him those numbers. So it's important to get a thorough picture of that whole process. You know, yes, the CFO is happy, but you know, he's not the one I'm sorry, Yvette, but he's not the one that's working every weekend to get the numbers.
I think absolutely important, and hence, you know, we talked about the Excel piece early on with the last polling as to how do we free our time to make sure we're doing the value-added stuff at the end of the day, and this is where again we talked about making sure we showcase you know, the benefits of any change project that would bring along. Very, very important. Panelists, thank you very much for answering all of those questions. Unfortunately, that's the only time we've got to answer questions. But ladies and gentlemen, we've got lots more questions to answer, and we will answer them via email. So please keep sending us whatever you have over the next 3 or 4 minutes that we've got left. Panelists, stay on the camera. We've got a few closing slides to just quickly go through. Just to let you know, our survey is around now, so a lot of you have taken part in it. Please do give us 10-12 minutes. They have fantastic insight, and of course, you will be getting the survey results straight in your inbox. So please click on the link and give us your insight as to what you're doing within your organization. And finally, just to let you know, a couple of diary dates for yourself: FP&A Trends webinar, Digital FP&A Practice. We were talking about a Durrington PLC case study there, May the 19th. And then the next one is top 5 FP&A challenges and how do we go about addressing them. Another fantastic topic, and that's coming along on May the 24th. So please do put those dates in your diary and join us. It is now a good time for me to say thank you to our sponsor, Unit 4, for making this possible. So thank you very much, Unit 4. To our panelists for their great insight. A lot of work has gone into the slides and the presentation. So thank you very much for sharing that with us today and for being on the platform. And finally, of course, to our audience for being with us. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation and the insight from all of the panelists. So thank you very much, and thank you for giving us the insight in your organizations as well by the polling question. This is how you can keep in touch with us, so please do so. It is now a good time to say goodbye. Before I do so, let me just quickly remind you that we've got a feedback session when I close the call. So please spend 30 seconds, just tell us how we did, but also tell us what else would you like to listen to in terms of topics for future webinars. So with that, I say good night. I bid you farewell. Good night, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you at the next one. Thank you very much, and goodbye. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.